Good day, I'm Dr. T, and welcome to my office. So today I'd like to talk about plagiarism detecting software, but before I can do that, I need to talk briefly about cheating. Okay, most of your students aren't going to be cheating. They have strong ethical guidelines that says don't do that, but a non-trivial amount of them don't have those guidelines, and they will totally cheat. Especially if they kind of feel desperate on a situation. There's all kinds of discussion on what makes students more willing to cheat versus not. But in general, you need to keep an eye out for academic dishonesty issues. Because of course, if students start cheating en masse, then it really messes up the whole educational system, and they can actually hurt them really badly. If you cheat your way through enough classes, then all of a sudden you get to a class where you can't cheat your way through and you don't have the necessary content. We're seeing this a little bit with COVID. We got a few students who are coming in like, well, you should already know this. You got A's in those classes, yet you don't know the content. How'd this? Sure. So you want to keep an eye on them for cheating, both for that individual students. It's a slippery slope. It's not going to end well for them if they're cheating rampantly. It's a very tempting approach for them. But also for the integrity of the whole class. If the class feels that other students are gaming the system, then they're going to be very disenfranchised, and you're going to know about it one way or another. And additionally, future stakeholders. If you start graduating students who can't do the job, those employers are not going to want to hire students from your school. So you want to get a nice kibosh on this whole cheating thing right off the bat. Now, when it comes to cheating, I kind of have a standard philosophy on this one. It's either all or nothing. Either I've got a really good case that the student is cheating. I've got a reasonable weight of evidence. It doesn't have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. We're not trying them for murder or anything here. But I've got a strong case that the student did something that violates either the syllabus, the student code of conduct, something right there. By the way, look at your student code of conduct. It's probably pretty all-inclusive. So either I've got a strong case, in which case they're getting a 0 on the assignment, and I'm filling out the paperwork and sending it up the food chain. Odds are the food chain is not going to do too much, but typically if the same student gets the same paperwork filled out 2, 3, 4 times, it gets real awkward for that student. Or I can't make a strong case. I've got a hunch, I've got a gut feeling, but I don't have a case. In which case, I say nothing. There's no reason to tip the student off that you think that they're cheating, and if they're not cheating because you were wrong, well, that's just insulting. Definitely don't penalize them, and if you do, they'll probably take it up the food chain, they'll probably appeal, and you've got a good chance of losing. Students, typically, if you've got a good case, they're not going to appeal. Some of them might, but generally what happens during the appeal process at most schools is the student appeals, it goes to an administrator, goes to a different administrator, and then it goes to a student committee. And what students don't realize is the committee of their peers are usually ruthless. If they've got a student, typically speaking, at most schools and most committees, if they got a student that they know is cheating and you've made a good evidence that that student is cheating, they are going to throw penalties that you will go, ew, wow, yikes. Far worse than what you would throw at them. So most students, if they learn enough to know this, they're not going to appeal it up if they didn't do it. Or at least if they think your case is weak. So if you have a strong case, you're not going to go through the appeal process most of the time. You always get that one student who's going to appeal everything and just like, dude, we got you dead to rights. Please stop. I'm thinking of 3 right now. My first year teaching, the first assignment I gave, I had 3 students submit identical, oddly worded wrong answers, which, one way you catch cheating is like, this is wrong and it's weird. Hey, here's another wrong. Wait. So I did that, and the students were going to appeal, and finally my boss was just like, we got you dead to rights. This is going to go on your transcript if you appeal any further. Med school, no, not going to happen if you appeal. I'm going to go yell at Dr. T for, well, at that time, Mr. T. I was ABD at the point. I'm going to go yell at Mr. T for not penalizing you enough. So he did not yell at me, but it was a stern, you have to give him a 0 minimum. I didn't give him a 0. So when you got academic dishonesty, it's either you got them or you don't, and if you got them, it's 0 and up the chain of command. Okay, so with plagiarism detection software, this is not the end, it is the start. You've given an essay assignment, some kind of writing assignment, it's scanned through. And what plagiarism detection softwares will typically do is they'll scan through and they'll see they've got, their data bank of other student papers, websites, etc. I wish the databanks were a little bit more expansive, and sometimes, just giving you a heads up, you have to do a deep dive into the settings to make sure they're all turned on. It's really annoying. It's of course I want them on. Why wouldn't I? Anyways, they'll compare words and phrases, and if it sees more than some kind of threshold, then it will flag it. And it will tell you basically what percentage of the paper was flagged. Some instructors are tempted to say, well, if you got over such and such percentage, I'm going to take off points. No, please don't do that. Set a percentage that kind of, get an idea for what the normal percentage for that one is, because it's going to flag things like turns of phrase, common statements. Let's just be honest, there are some things that can only be said one or two ways, especially if you're talking lab reports. There's only so many ways you can say, put the chemical in the beaker. Especially once you're doing the whole passive third person stuff. There's really only 2 or 3 ways you can do that. So there's going to be a lot of hits, especially if you've got a lot of students, just because how else are you going to write that? It's not that they're copying, that's the way you write that sentence. And that sentence has to be in that part of the paper because that's the nature of the assignment. So you're going to get a feeling for what the normal number is. Every assignment's going to be different. I remember in grad school when we were just starting to use this, we had 600 students submitting lab reports over the same lab. Normal was 80%. The faculty didn't even bat an eye at 60% or 60 to 80% because there was only so much you could do with that lab report. Typically, that's pretty extreme case. That was big school, single lab kind of thing. Whereas, for myself, usually in the 20s or so for most of my assignments, I don't even bat an eyelash. Conveniently, Turnitin will actually kind of color code them. So, low, I think it's 20s or 30s, it's color codes it green or something. I just ignore that. But as you go through, you kind of look at assignments okay, what's kind of a high level? And so once it's in the 50s, 60s, 70s, anything in that range or above, I don't go immediately, I go look at it. And most of your Turnitin software is going to say why it flagged each one. And so if it goes in there and it's highlighted a bunch of random sentences and they're from different sources, this is probably just common turns of phrase, etc. In chemistry, it'll flag the chemical names because they're that big. It thinks they're sentences. So those I just ignore. I'm not going to, they may have cheated from all those sources, or I've got no case. But if I start seeing paragraphs, especially if I start seeing paragraphs with a couple of strategic words switched out for synonyms, yeah, telltale sign is sentence, break, one word different, continuing on the highlight, another, okay. You knew you were cheating. This is exactly the same as something else, but you swapped out a couple of words that still got flagged. Students think this works. It does not. The software is smart enough. Now, this sets up a pretty good argument. If I've got more than about a paragraph, this is a good chance that this matches. And so now I've got a case, and I'm going to give them a 0, and I'm going to send it up through administration. I'm going to fill out the proper paperwork. Currently getting ready to do 4 pieces of paperwork. My school, you do the paperwork after you've told the student, hey, you cheated, here's your 0, and then wait to see if they want to appeal. Kind of annoying. I'd like to just get her all done at once, but I understand that's the way my school works. So I've got 4 students who I'm given a few more days for them to appeal, at which point I'm just sending in the paperwork. But yeah, so that's your general goal. If it looks like they're obviously, if you can build a case, you're going to have to argue to a third party that this student cheated. If you can make that case, go for it. Nail them to the wall. If you can't, nope. Don't even say a thing. Heads up on the software. Some of the plagiarism detection software doesn't recognize things like references. So of course the reference, if you're doing MLA, everyone's reference, if it's the same reference, is going to be the exact same. Sometimes it recognizes it, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it says it will, but it won't. Obviously things like quotes, etc. So you do really have to pay attention. That number is just a suggestion. That number is a, hey, look at me, nothing more. So if it's a high number, go look at it, go investigate. So with that said, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in later videos. And conveniently, Turnitin